Welcome to Loreology. Sure, other courses might teach you about sociology or economics, but here we talk about equally important things. Things like Egyptian space wizards, murderous twinks, and of course, daddy issues. I'm your professor, Lorcus the Lore Master, and with me as always are my students, Seth and Brady. Say hi, boys!
Hello, boys!
Now, are you boys familiar with the old expression that there's a black sheep in every family? You know, that one kid that just got in with a bad crowd, that sort of thing?
I mean, I'm the only one living in California out of my family, so
Same.
I have a little bit of experience with that, maybe.
Yeah, I think we all know that kid. You know, either we are that kid or we know that kid.
If there isn't one in the family,
you're the
one in the family.
You. Yeah, it's you.
Well, seeing as how Warhammer 40k likes to take things to extremes, it only makes sense that their idea of this sort of family drama involves demon gods in a full-scale interplanetary war. Today, we'll be going over the basics of the Chaos Space Marines and their origins. Now, each warband has tons of lore, with stories of hubris, tragedy, insanity, and death. In time, we'll give each chapter an episode all their own, whether they be Loyalist or Chaos. But for now, we'll just be covering the basics of the Chaos factions.
I don't know, I just think it's interesting of like what made the Space Marines go over to Chaos, and also like now that they're on the side of Chaos, like how does that change their directives and what they want to do? Like, it's interesting to me.
And you don't have a lot of experience with the Horus Heresy, and I don't think you were there for the Imperium of Man lesson that we did either.
I was not.
So this is going to be a good refresher for me and a good introduction for you.
It all started with a psychic superhuman simply known as the Emperor. Now, the Emperor had big plans for the galaxy. He foresaw a universe without religious dogma or interfactional feuds holding humanity back. A future where technology and the light of reason could hold absolute rule. Of course, as we'll find out, his methods were, well, sort of questionable. In his quest, the Emperor united a ravaged Earth under his banner, and soon went to work on his next big project, the creation of the Primarchs. Each Primarch was at first just a little baby made from the Emperor's own DNA. His plan was to raise them under his firm guiding hand, so that they might rule the galaxy as father and sons.
You're creating children and you're like, we will rule the galaxy. It's like, you don't think that kind of pressure is going to fuck up your kids?
And they're just babies. You're like, are you ready?
Right.
But something went wrong. One night, each of the wee babby Primarchs was scattered through the galaxy by a mysterious force. But what could have done this? Well, that's the subject of its own video right there. But what matters is that the Primarchs were lost, and the Emperor took it upon himself to find each one personally. Of course, by the time he did find them, they'd all grown up and had lives and dreams of their own. Now, the Emperor was known throughout his realm as a calm, charismatic, and intelligent leader who could turn entire armies to his side with nothing but a haiku. But, while he was doubtlessly a great leader, it turns out he was kind of a crappy dad. Unfortunately, the Emperor never really cared about his son's emotions, goals, or desires. He just wanted to give each one an army of genetically enhanced space knights and use them to beat the galaxy into submission. Some of the Emperor's sons realized this a bit sooner than others, like Lorgar, who wanted to preach the Emperor's truth like a religion, peacefully bringing stray worlds into the fold. Only he was verbally torn down by the Emperor for not conquering worlds fast enough. Or Pederabo, who was a consummate engineer who just wanted to build roads and aqueducts, but was made by the Emperor to construct siege weapons. And then there's poor Angron. Angron had been enslaved and made to fight as a gladiator on his homeworld, but he'd managed to start a revolution in an effort to free his people. But then the Emperor came along and just abducted him and left all Angron's rebel buddies to die.
Wow.
Okay.
This is like classic, like overbearing dad, but on a cosmic scale.
I'm right.
Yeah,
You're
I don't
wrong.
care what you want to do. You're going to be a professional athlete.
Now, the despair and resentment of these Primarchs only grew towards their father as time went on. And like so many slimy dudes on Tinder, malicious cosmic entities called the Chaos Gods slipped into their collective DMs to exploit their daddy issues. Half the Emperor's sons, seduced or manipulated by Chaos, turned their back on their father's vision, seeking to tear the Imperium down. Those sons, still loyal to their father, rose to defend the Emperor's vision. The result was a civil war that would change humanity's fate forever. And so, this war was dubbed the Horus Heresy. The events of the heresy warrant their own video, but to make a long story short, the whole thing ended with most of the Primarchs either missing, dead, or indisposed. Horus had been annihilated by the Emperor, and the Emperor himself was now a comatose vegetable hooked up to a golden throne / life support. Meanwhile, the surviving dissident Primarchs retreated into a cosmic rift called the Eye of Terror. But who were these warriors of chaos? These rogue knights who dance with demons and look like a Danzig album that sprouted legs and developed a taste for human skulls? Well, I'm glad you asked. Sit down, boys, because it's time to meet the chapters of the Chaos Marines! First off, there's the Word Bearers, who were founded by Lorgar. Lorgar strongly believed in the power of faith, and its ability to embolden even the smallest and weakest people to do great things. Of course, his dad was violently anti-religious, so when the Emperor publicly humiliated and rebuked Lorgar for his belief, Chaos was glad to take him in and twist his ideals. The Word Bearers are one of the more devoutly religious of the warbands. While others might worship only one god or see Chaos as little more than an avenue to true power, the Word Bearers legitimately worship Chaos Undivided. They believe the four ruinous powers and even the seemingly divine power of the Emperor are all just aspects of Chaos as a whole, like fingers on a hand. Of course, they also practice human sacrifice and summon demons and kill the innocent because Games Workshop is allergic to the idea of nuance. But why are we talking about Lorgar and his boys when it was Horus that led the revolt? Well, because Lorgar is actually responsible for the state of humanity today. When he was still certain the Emperor was a god, he wrote a book called the Lectitio Divinitatus. This book would go on to be the foundation for the cult of the God Emperor and the Adeptus Ministorum. Then, once he fell to Chaos, it was he who convinced Horus to turn to the powers of the Dark Gods. So really, all this started with him. Then you have the Black Legion, founded by the War Master himself, Horus Lupercal. And they're about as vanilla as you can get with an army of mutated, demon-worshipping space barbarians. These guys have a pretty simple way of doing battle. Find where your enemy is weakest, and just hammer it with as many guys as you can. Now, these guys used to think that Horus was the ultimate life form, that it was he who was the master of man, not the Emperor. So, when the Emperor wiped their senpai from existence, they didn't take it well, needless to say. So now the Black Legion has dedicated itself entirely to the complete annihilation of anything and everything the Emperor has made. At the moment, they're led by one of Horus's first warriors, Abaddon the Despoiler, because every Chaos character is named the edgiest thing possible. Then there's the Thousand Sons, led by Magnus the Red. Magnus didn't so much fall to Chaos as much as he was sort of pushed off a proverbial cliff. Magnus was an intelligent man with some truly amazing psychic abilities, but the Emperor made it clear that he wasn't a fan of using psionics, due to their ties with the Warp and its demonic inhabitants. But Magnus kept studying in secret. When Horus saw what a valuable ally Magnus could be, he tricked Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, into destroying Magnus's homeworld of Prospero. Magnus, in his grief, fell to the lore of Tzeentch, god of sorcery and deception. The Thousand Sons are all psychers, every last one. And they're some of the most powerful ones in the setting, too. Of course, thanks to a spell called the Rubric of Ahriman, a huge chunk of their number are now little more than ghostly spirits animating their own armor after their flesh was reduced to dust. Yeah, Magnus and his boys have had it kinda rough. Well, then there's the Death Guard, founded by Mortarion. Mortarion was always a grumpy bastard, and his legions are no different. Mortarion hated the Emperor, mostly because Big E stole his chance at revenge by killing someone that he had sworn a blood vendetta against. From there, it was all downhill. But even before the fall to Chaos, the Death Guard believed that the weak needed to fear the strong, and that nobody was stronger than them. So, when they retreated to the Eye of Terror and Nurgle's Rot completely kicked their faces in, they had a bit of a collective breakdown, and in a truly toxic move, they decided that they'd just go out and infect everybody, weak and strong. And in a truly toxic move, worthy of the entire League of Legends player base, they decided that they'd just go out and infect anybody, weak or strong, with as many of Nurgle's plagues as they could, because if they couldn't be the strongest, nobody would. The World Eaters were founded by Angron, and are some of Khorne's favorite warriors. That's because each one, upon recruitment, has devices implanted into their brain called butcher's nails, which amplify their aggression tenfold. So not only are these guys genetically enhanced warriors made stronger through the blessings of a god of war, but they're also predisposed to do things as violently as possible. They're also prone to infighting more than any other group on account of aforementioned cocktail of demonic rage and brain nails. They are so used to infighting, in fact, that one of their most prominent members is a guy named Karn the Betrayer, who, despite his name, is actually a pretty cool guy. But we'll talk about him more when the World Eaters get their own episode. And who could forget Conrad Kurz and his Night Lords? Kurz was raised on a former prison planet, which had since become sort of a festering crime hole full of illicit dealings. So, basically Detroit. Conrad decided to become something of a vigilante, but did it in the worst possible way. This greasy, edgy little weirdo just started punishing even the pettiest of crimes with the most gruesome murders imaginable. Jaywalkers were beaten to death with their own severed legs, while loiterers were nailed to the floor. It wasn't long before the whole planet was so terrified of him that they called him the Night Haunter. The Emperor, seeing absolutely no problem with this, gave his homicidal maniac of a son an entire army of like-minded, superpowered serial killers. His army specializes in moving unseen and acts of horrible violence and unmitigated brutality that terrify people into submission. Even after their fall to chaos, not much changed for the Night Lords. They were already killing people in the most brutal ways possible, after all. All that changed was the victims, and the Night Lords are more than happy to illustrate that we are all the same under the skin. Just don't ask what they do with the skin afterwards.
No, I don't like that. They're like judge, jury, executioner.
It's like if everybody in Arkham Asylum was a Space Marine.
Yep.
Now, veering away from the horror of the Night Lords, we have the Iron Warriors. Their Primarch, Petarabo, saw chaos as a potential means to an end. Ever the pragmatist, he thought he could dissect and eventually weaponize the forces of the Immaterium and strengthen the Empire. Petarabo was also kind of a salty, petty jerk, though, like Mortarion. But while Mortarion wanted to prove himself to the world, Petarabo just wanted to outmaneuver his brother Rogel Dorn and used the entire heresy as an excuse to try and flex on him, to varying levels of success. The Iron Warriors are masters of demonic technology, blending demon flesh and machinery to create horrific chimeras of metal and malice, and boy do they love their artillery and siege weapons. If it can blast, burn, bludgeon, or blow you to smithereens, chances are the Iron Warriors not only have mastered it, but found a way to cram a demon into it to make it somehow more deadly. Now, you'd think the guys calling themselves the Emperor's children would be die-hard loyalists, but when it comes to the sons of the Primarch Fulgrim, not so much. Fulgrim may be second to Magnus and Lorgar in terms of nuance among the traitor Primarchs, as he's actually shown to have regretted his fall to Slaaneish's temptations. Though, to be fair to him, he was also kind of possessed by a demonic sword for most of that. But that regret never stopped him or his followers from slaughtering those in his legion who still held loyalties to the Emperor, like at the massacre of Istvan III. With those loyalists who value virtue, selflessness, and truth slaughtered to a man, the remaining Emperor's children became obsessed with the pursuit of new sensation. Slaanesh had shown them the depths of pleasure and the heights of agony, and now they sweep across the galaxy in the pursuit of more. They wear the name of the Loyalist Legion as an open mockery of the stagnation and decay of the Imperium. It may also be a way to show that the Emperor makes monsters just as well as any Chaos God. And last, or perhaps first, is the Alpha Legion. These guys are... oh boy, if anybody deserves a standalone episode, it's these guys. Everything the Alpha Legion does is shrouded in mystery, contradictions, subterfuge, and flat-out lies. Their Primarch is no exception. He might have been one guy named Alfarius Omegon, or he may have actually been two guys named Alfarius and Omegon. One of them might have been killed by Rogel Dorn, but that might have been a decoy? And to make things even weirder, they might not actually be a Chaos Legion at all. What we do know is that back before the heresy, the Alpha Legion were the Emperor's masters of spycraft, subterfuge, and black ops. And even now, they still seem to employ those kinds of tactics. A few have admitted that they're still loyal to the Emperor, but that might just be a cover. Sure, some have died fighting for Chaos Legions on Vrax, but to die in service of a Legion's greater goals is something any Legion, Loyalist or Chaos, would do. So maybe they died to maintain their cover? Who knows? We're definitely coming back to these duplicitous weirdos, but for now, just assume whatever they say is a lie until proven otherwise.
I mean, talk about deep cover, too. How long ago was the Horus Heresy?
About 10,000 years ago.
Holy
Can you imagine 10,000 years undercover?
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And nothing's come up?
Dedicated.
That is
Dedicated.
That is great. I love them.
While demons of chaos and their seething masses of elemental evil are fun bad guys to fight, the Chaos Astartes provide a more human face to the ruinous powers. Now, one can argue that it's a little weird that the guys who defied a tyrannic fascist war criminal in golden armor got written as baby-eating murder monsters who serve 4 flavors of Satan, but I like to think of it like this. Those who fall to chaos can serve as an example of how far we can fall if we allow our lives to be defined by our hatred, our ambitions, our spite, or our greed. There's plenty of guys who defy the Imperium who aren't completely evil, like the Farside Enclave, and soon the Leagues of Votan. And recent additions to the truly massive series of Horus Heresy novels have done a great job of giving characters who were once miscellaneous bad guys much more nuance and even some sympathy. And there's even displays of Chaos Marines showing something like real honor in their actions. For example, one of my favorite short stories, The Ancient Awaits, features a group of 1,000 sons sacrificing themselves to right a 10,000-year-old wrong. And while you won't see me screaming about how Magnus did nothing wrong, the Horus Heresy was just as much about the Emperor's failures as it was about the Primarchs succumbing to temptation. But I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. So, what about you guys? Which Chaos Legion is your favorite, and what faction, character, or event should we talk about next? Let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button to appease the dark gods, and subscribe if you too wish to walk the path to glory! Now, before I leave, if you're gonna take anything from this lecture, let it be this. Even some of history's greatest monsters were once people with hopes and dreams. Except Conrad Kurz. No one likes Conrad Kurz. Class dismissed!